Welcome to Live Daf, your online Daf Yomi shir.
Shalom Aleichem, welcome back to today's Daf Yomi, which is Eruvin Daf Yud Zayin. We got 2 lines from the top, and we'll be discussing inferior walls, low quality partitions, not built like your typical wall, which has both elements of Shesi ve'erev, vertical and horizontal elements, which keep it strong and durable. But a mechitza grua only contains one of those elements. It's either shesi, vertical, have the poles going this way without a real horizontal crossover to support it, to sustain it properly, or erev. For instance, the ropes, which are going across this way. So these are poor quality mechitzas. They appear like temporary, fleeting mechitzas. They don't have the residential flavor to them. And therefore, the Chacham will concern, these things look like an open, unfenced area. They don't look like they're really encircling a sayacha. They more closely resemble a field, a forest. And therefore, we said like this: if the area enclosed is small in size, only up until base sa'asayim, an area that you can plant 2 sa'ah of seeds. So this is an area which is 100 amma by 50 amma, for which we have a precedent from the Chatzar HaMishkan, the courtyard around the Mishkan, which is also really a non-residential area. Nevertheless, it's considered Shesayachid. So we have a precedent from there that this type of shear does give the impression that it's intended for personal use, and is considered even midarbanan like a Rishus Hayachid to allow carrying within it. So although these are mechitzas, gruas being employed, encircling this area, but if it's up until the point of Beis Asayim, so it's small in nature, it's that small of an area which gives the impression like it's a area intended for personal use and has a din of Rishus Hayachid. So this is for one person, an individual, encircles himself with these type of mechitzas. 2 people have the same halacha. 3 people, that's a shayara. These people are traveling, a caravan, and over there the Chachamim allow them to encircle even a much greater area. Kedei tzorchan, whatever they need, they can encircle themselves with these types of mechitzas and would be considered a proper Rishus Hayachid. But that's only provided they need the area. But if there's too big an area, they don't really need the entire area. There's actually a space there which is vacant. How large of a vacancy? Base sa'asayim. So there's an area of 100 by 50 amma in this containment for which they have no use. Then the whole containment is batal, because we have 2 negative elements. Number 1, the entire mechitza here is flimsy and of temporary nature, and number 2, there's a large space here which is not being used. So based on that, we determine that this enclosure here does not have a residential status to it, and therefore they cannot carry within it. Says the Gemara 2 lines from the top, Amar of Gidol Marav. He's going to present for us a paradoxical statement. Shloisha b'chamish asur. If we have 3 people who encircle themselves with these type of mechitzas in an area of 5 sa'ah, then they cannot use this area. Asur. B'sheva, if they encircled a large area, sheva, containing 7 sa'ah, mutar, and they can use the area. Sounds like a paradox. If it's smaller, it's asur. If it's a greater area, it's mutar. How can that be? Amr lei. So they responded to Rav Gidol. Amr Rav Hachi, did Rav really say this? Sounds strange. Amr Lu, he says, certainly. Oy Raisa Nevi Yuksivi. He made a shvur in the name of the Torah, Nevi Yuksuvim, to Amr Rav Hachi. Indeed, this is a correct, accurate quote from Rav. Rav did say this. Amr Rav Ashi, my kashi, what's the big deal? What's the difficulty? Dil Melchi Kamar, perhaps this is what he meant to say. He's speaking about, in both halachas, that they encircled an area which contains 7 sa'ah. So we have 3 people in this encircled area. It depends on their needs. Let's say they only needed, for their personal use, an area of 6. They decided to give themselves some extra breathing space. They encircled 7. So we only have 1 sa'ah of area which is beyond their needs. That's okay. Afilu b'sheva matar, and they can use the entire area. However, what if they only need an area of 5 sa'ah? And what do? V'yikifu b'sheva. They encircled 7, which gives them 2 extra sa'ah worth of space, which is unneeded. That's too large a gap. Afilu b'chamesh asurin. Then the entire mechitza is nullified. They can't even use the original 5. So that's all he meant to say. They encircled an area of 7. What Rav meant to say, that when they use shloisha b'chamesh asurin, if they only need 5 out of the 7, which leaves 2 unavailable space, 2 empty space, then they can't even use the original 5. But if they need 6 of the 7, leaving them only 1 empty saw, then that's okay. We consider this encirclement as residential containment, residential mechitzos, has a din of rishus hayacht. Says the Gemara, ve'ela hadiktani. If so, how do we explain the brisa? The brisa says, "Vad shelo yehi beis asayim panui," that these people, this group, can encircle themselves with these types of inferior mechitzos, provided there is no beis asayim which is vacant. What does that mean? Mailav panim adam. Doesn't that not mean that there are 2 sa'ah above, beyond the standard allotment, the per-person allotment? So he said if one person encircles himself, he has a space of 2 sa'ah. So let's assume that if 3 people, theoretically they should be entitled to 3 times that amount, for a total of 6 sa'ah. So when the Brisa says there can't be 2 sa'ah vacant, it means 8 sa'ah, meaning 2 beyond the 6 that they should be entitled to. But perhaps if it's only 7 that they encircled, that's okay. So it's not compatible with what we just said. Because we just learned that even 3 people that built a mechitza around 7, and they don't need 2 of that 7, that's not a mechitza. So it's incompatible with the words of the Brisa. Says, well, no, that's not what the Brisa meant. Lo yiponimi kelim. What the Brisa meant to say was that if you have an area of 2 sa'ah, which is panim kelim, vacant from utensils, meaning it's not used. They don't need it for their needs. They only need 5 out of the 7. So although they're 3 people, those mechitzas are worthless because there's an area of 2 sa'ah that's unused. And this is very much compatible with what Rav said. So the chiddush here is that even though one person would get 2 sa'ah, and now we have 3 people, so logic would say, give them 6 sa'ah as a standard allotment. And then, on top of that, if there are 2 vacant sa'ah, it becomes batal. But if it's only 7 in total, which is 1 above the theoretical allotment, it should be okay. Rav says no. Even when it's 3 people, we look at their needs. If there is an area of 2 sa'ah that they don't need, that's too large an area. And the mechitza becomes batal. Continues the Gemara. Itma we learned. So we just said that if it's an area encircling a caravan, a group of people, 3 people, then they're allowed to encircle even a large great area, provided that they need the area for their use. Says the Gemara, Shloisha, what if they began Shabbos with 3 people? Umeis echad b'hem, and one passed away during Shabbos. Or in the reverse. Let's say they began the Shabbos with 2 people, Shnayim, which are not entitled to a large area. They're only allowed to have 2 sa'ah in total. They're not a caravan. During Shabbos, somebody came along, he arrived, joined the group, now they have 3. The question is, what determines the halacha? Is it the commencement of Shabbos? We take a look at what happened at the entry point of Shabbos. If it's 3, then it has the din of a group, and this area is kosher. If it's only 2, they don't have a right to enclose an area so great and you can't carry there. Or do we look at the present moment? How many people are living there now? If it's 3, they have a din of a group. If it's 2, they don't. So the question is, what determines? Is it Shabbos? Or is it the state of residence? Between Rav Huna and Rav Yitzchak. Chad Omar, Shabbos Geremes. It is Shabbos that determines matters. So whatever the situation was at the onset of Shabbos, that's what sets the rules for the entire Shabbos. So for instance, if they began with 3 people, even if 1 disappeared, they're still okay. V'chad Omar D'Urin German. It's the residency, that sets matters straight, that establishes the halach. Let's take a look in Rashi, which is 27 lines from the top of the Amud. Beginning with the words Shabbos Geremes. Explains Rashi. Shloisha, so they began Shabbos with 3 people. Meis echad mem, 1 died. Hoyel v'geremes Shabbos lahatir. Since Shabbos made this thing mutter. Mutar and Ashnaim Afil Rabbi Yehuda. Even though Rabbi Yehuda holds that we need 3 people, this group, to allow encircling a large area. In this case, we have a group, because that was the situation at the beginning of Shabbos. In the reverse, if it began with 2 people, Shnayim, and they encircled an area greater than 2 so, which they're not really entitled to. So this was the position in the beginning of Shabbos, even though eventually some fellows came along and completed the group, made it into a shayara, asur, and Rabbi Yehuda contributed its asur. Since at the entry point of Shabbos, Garmal Issa, the Shabbos was Garm, that should be asur, because at that point they didn't have a group yet. So according to the Shita Shabbos, the entry point of Shabbos is Goyrem the Halach. The other Shita says it's the residence, the urine Goyrem. So if we have a case where Gimel Umeis Echad Mem, they began with 3 and 1 died, the Batzra the urine, that minimized lessened the share, the total number of inhabitants, Asur and they're Asa, because they only have 2 people. So they're Asa Mekifu Yoiz Mesasayim, if they encircle an area greater than 2 sa, for which 2 people are not entitled to. What if it was in the reverse? Shnayim. At the beginning of Shabbos there was 2, and then more people showed up and completed the group. Mutar. They're mutar, the Ikud Yurim, because at the present moment we have the proper number of residents. There's 2 ways to look at it. Is Shabbos establishing matters, or do we look at the present moment? How many residents are present? Says the Gemara. So we have machlokes between Rav Huna and Rav Yitzchak, and we're unsure who says what. Says, well, let's explore. To Stayim. You could conclude the Rav Huna, who the Amar Shabbos Geremes. He's the one that actually holds that Shabbos determines factors here. The Amar Rabba, Boim Rav Huna. I asked Rav Huna. Boim Rav Yehuda. I asked Rav Yehuda. What's going to be in a case where Irev Derech HaPesach, we have 2 chatzeres, 2 courtyards alongside each other with a doorway in between, and that allowed them, then able to make an Erev chatzeres between both yards, so allowed carrying one to the other. They merged their usage, their ownership through this doorway. V'nista Pesach, and sometime during Shabbos the doorway got blocked up. Now there's really no proper access point between one chatz and the other. Or derech hachaloin, they had a window in between both chatzeres, which enabled the joining forces making the erev chatzeres. V'nistam hachaloin, and the chaloin get closed up. What is the halacha here? V'amar li, or v'amar li, they told me Shabbos hoyel v'utra, since at the first point of Shabbos there was a heter, that heter is chal. That heter becomes established and retains itself throughout the Shabbos. To Stayim, certainly we can conclude from here that it is Rav Huna who subscribes to this concept that Shabbos establishes the status that retains itself throughout the entire Shabbos, even though there's a change through the middle of Shabbos. Just as in this case where the Chatzeris still will maintain their Erev Chatzeris, they can go ahead and transfer from one Chatzah to the other. For instance, they'll throw something over this wall in between them, even though there's no real proper access point between 2 Chatzeris, which would not allow them to make an Erev Chatzeris in the future if there's no proper doorway, etc. But since the Erev was already been established for the Shabbos, it continues functioning. So likewise, in our case, when we have, for instance, 3 people at the onset of Shabbos in this large encirclement, this large area which was encircled by the inferior mechitzas, so this halacha, this shayara halacha, continues throughout Shabbos, even though they lost one of their members throughout Shabbos. Says the Gemara, Lema, shall we say, Rav Huna, Rav Yitzchak. This machlekes, whether Shabbos determines or whether the current situation determines, should we say it corresponds to another machlekes tanoi beplukta to Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda kamiflagi? Shall we say that one thing depends on the other? This nan, as we learned in the Mishnah, if a chatzah was breached on both sides, it lost its mechitza. Likewise, the same thing happened to a house. So it's breached, for instance, so it lost its mechitza status, it becomes an exposed area. Or a mavi which lost its lechi or kaira. So this happened during Shabbos. At the entry point of Shabbos, everything was fine. But now on Shabbos, this drastic change took place. What happens now? Can they carry through this area or not? Says Rabbi Yehuda, yes, mutar and loisa Shabbos, they are mutar all along the Shabbos because the heter that was present at the beginning of Shabbos continues throughout this entire Shabbos. It is chal, and it retains itself. It doesn't lose its status. However, in the future, they can no longer carry in this area due to the fact that it lost its mechitza or lost its lechi or kura. Rabbi Yossi, no, you can't say that. If you maintain that they are mutar for that Shabbos, so why not continue that heter throughout? They should retain the heter even in the future. If you certainly agree with me that they're asr in the future, asr on Shabbos, there certainly should be asr for that Shabbos as well. So it would appear that the machlekes between Rabbi Yehuda, who says that once the heter arrives, it doesn't leave throughout that Shabbos, and Rabbi Yossi, who says, well, we don't reckon with that factor. Let's take a look at the present situation. We don't have mechitzas, you can't carry. So it appears that these two shittas correspond to the two opinions mentioned earlier between Rav Huna and Rav Yitzchak. It says more lamer Rav Huna Damar Rav Yehuda. Perhaps Rav Huna, who says Shabbos is the determining factor, is compatible with Rav Yehuda, who seems to say likewise. Rav Yitzchak, who says we must evaluate the current situation, follows Rav Yossi, Damar Rav Yossi, who says that despite the fact that the onset of Shabbos, this place is mutter, things will change throughout Shabbos. Says the Gemara, not necessarily, perhaps, the things are really unrelated. Amalach Rav Huna will say, Anod Amri, I feel Rabbi Yossi. My Shita can concur even with Rabbi Yossi's Shita. Why? Adkan, like Amar Rabbi Yossi Hasam, it's only over there Rabbi Yossi maintains that it's Asr. You know why? Ella, the lesson of Mechitzas, those Mechitzas are no longer present. It was a Pirza, the Lechi disappeared. Therefore, he says, the place is not enclosed properly. How could he carry there? This is in contrast to our case, where the caravan encircled themselves and one member disappeared. It's no mechitzas. Mechitzas is still here. It's fully enclosed. Therefore, even he would agree that it retains its heter that arrived at the beginning of Shabbos. Considers the Gemara. The same thing in the reverse regarding the other shit. For Rabbi Yitzchak Amar, Anoda, I'm Rabbi Yehuda. My shita, my opinion will concur even according to Rabbi Yehuda. Why? Adkan loikam Rabbi Yehuda Hasam. It's only over there where Rabbi Yehuda maintains that once the heter was applied at the onset of Shabbos, it retains that status. That's only because the residents are still intact. Ela the Islam the urine, the residents are still there. So since they received a heter at the beginning of Shabbos, they don't lose it. However, in our case, what happened? We lost a member of the group. Less with the urine not present. So there was that drastic change. The inhabitants are not here any longer. Therefore, how could you say that the heter that was applied to the initial three will continue throughout Shabbos? In fact, the fact that one of them is missing. The configuration of the residence, of the residency changes. Therefore, even Rabbi Yehuda would agree, this case is different, and there is no heter to continue carrying throughout this large area which was intended for three, and three are no longer here. So in summary, we have a case where things change during Shabbos. They encircled this large area, and three people were there, which were entitled to encircle this large area with those mechitas gruos, and one of them passed away on Shabbos. Or in the reverse, they began with two people, and one arrived to complete the number to three. Rav Huna says, Shabbos determines. So when they began with three, even though they lost a member, they stay mutter. When they began with two, even though there was an added member, they are asr. Rabbi Yitzchak says that the urine, the number of residents, the current situation is what determines matters. So although they began with three, since right now there were only two, they're asr. So it began with two, but now there's an additional member that arrived. It's okay. It's considered to be a shayara who are entitled to enclose even a large, great area with these mechitzas gruos. The Gemara brought another machlokes tanoim with a chatzar shenifratz, a bayis shenifratz, or a mavi that lost his lechi yikara. Rabbi says Shabbos hayel v'hutra hutra. Since at the entry point of Shabbos it was a heter here, even though the mechitzas disappeared, you can continue carrying throughout Shabbos. Rabbi says, take a look at those mechitzas. Then are here no longer. You can't carry in this exposed area. The Gemara tells us that indeed this machlokes is really unrelated with the former machlokes. Continues the Gemara. Getting back to our Mishnah, where the Chachamim concluded the Mishnah by saying, Echad mishnei dvarim. even if a mechitza only contains one of those two elements, either vertical or horizontal, it's okay. And even an individual who encircles himself with this temporary, fleeting, unsteady mechitza, he can carry throughout it despite its large size area. Now the Tanakama also said the same thing. He said that even a yachid can go ahead and do the same thing. Says the Gemara, the Chacham are merely repeating the Tanakama. Hainu Tanakama. Says the Gemara, there's something here. There's some difference. But now the difference between them will be yachid, if it's an individual who's using this mechitza, ubi yishuv. He's present in an inhabited area where he has access to proper walls, proper partitions. So that will be the point of difference between Tanakama, who says that only if he's out in the road where he can't really properly access bona fide mechitzas, we allow him to encircle himself with these flimsy mechitzas. But if he's in a yishuv, he's in a city, inhabited area where he has access to proper building material, we don't allow him. Whereas the Rabbanon give a blank check. They say a yachid, even if he's in a yishuv, it's okay because one of these two things are enough, either shesi ve'erev, they consider it to be a proper mechitza, despite its large size, despite the fact that it's greater than 2 sa. Continues the Mishnah. Abor dvarim patru b'machna. There are 4 things that Chachamim were lenient with. They applied a heter, a ptur, when it comes to Jewish soldiers that engaged in battle. Number 1, mavim eitzim kol makom. They're entitled to bring firewood from wherever they find it. We know that the Chacham are allowed to make something hefker, bezdin hefker. They can render something ownerless in a time of need. Chacham allowed them to gather firewood for their needs. Upturim rechitzis adayim. They're potter from searching for water, for washing your hands before the meal. Umidmai. If they have produce bought from Amaretz, an unlearned fellow, where there's a suffix, whether or not he attended to the obligations of Tumas Ramaisus properly, generally we're not meant to eat this. But the Chachamim allowed these fellows to go ahead and eat it, due to the necessity involved here. Umila arif, they're potter from establishing an Erev Chatzeres, they're allowed to carry from one tent to the other without making Erev Chatzeres. Tanarabban. Machna yoytzeis l'melchemes harishus. This camp, this group of soldiers, which are going out to conduct a melchemes rishus, an arbitrary war. Rashi explains this as being a war other than the war of Yeshua to capture Eretz Yisrael. So even though they're going to a melchemes rishus, which is not a melchemes mitzvah, they have these heterim, mutarim begezel eitzim yivation, they're allowed to go ahead and gather even dry wood, which appears to be designated for firewood, so they can go and take it without any concern of the Isser of Gezel. Rabbi Yehuda ben Tema Omer, Av choynim kol makom, they're allowed to camp anywhere they need, b'makom she'nerogim sham nikvarim, and they are buried at the very exact place where they are killed. Even though it's a place which is privately owned, they're entitled to have the kvura right then and there. Continues the Gemara, mutarim begezel eitzim yivation. Let's analyze what this means. They're allowed to go take wood? Is this a special heter for soldiers? This is already a heter which was established beforehand by Yeshua when they inherited Eretz Yisrael. Haita kandid Yeshua. The Amar Mari learned, Asora Tnoim, Hisni Yeshua. Yeshua set forth 10 conditions when they were Yerush Eretz Yisrael. Sheyu Marin B'Chershim, that one should be allowed to take his livestock and graze, even in forests that don't belong to him. They can go ahead and eat the grass. And that was the condition that Yeshua employed when he distributed Eretz Yisrael. We assume that the fellow that owns his forest is not going to pick that grass anyway. So the takana was that a person should not be mocked, but he shouldn't object to his friend grazing in his forest. Umalaktim eitzim misadesem. Likewise, a person go ahead and be malakit, gather wood from another person's field. So you see, this is a pre-dated takana, something which is unrelated to soldiers at battle. Says what is the difference? Hasam behizmi vehigi. You're only allowed taking hizmi vehigi, these low-lying bushes, these thorns and nettles. Hacha b'shar eitzim. When it comes to the soldiers, he can even take ordinary wood, which perhaps is designated for firewood. Inami, or another pshat, hasam mechabaran. You're only allowed taking these thorns, these bushes, which are still attached to the ground. Here we're speaking about taking something which is already detached, which was designated, reserved for firewood. They can go ahead and take it regardless. Inami, another teretz, Hasan Balachan. There we are speaking about picking these thorns from the ground, these attached thorns, which are lach and they're fresh and not really suitable for firewood. Over here, we allow them to pick the firewood even if it is very dry. So there are 3 exceptions, 3 allowances when it comes to soldiers above and beyond the ordinary standard takana v'yeshua. Number 1, they can take ordinary firewood. Number 2, even if it's been detached already, cut off from the ground, and dry, which case it appears like it's designated for a person's use, they're allowed to go and take it to supply themselves for their needs. They camp anywhere, where the person dies, there we bury them. Pshita, isn't that self-evident? Mace mitzvah. He has a din like an unattended mace. A mace mitzvah acquires the place where he's lying on. So if you see a mace mitzvah, you bury him right down and there, even if it's sitting in somebody's field. So these soldiers should be classified like a mace mitzvah. Says the Gemara, Tzricha must be speaking afagav de islay koivrin. This person who died has koivrin. Rashi says yishla yoshim. He has people to inherit him, meaning he has koivrim to take care of him, and that does not have a din of a mace mitzvah. The sanya ezo mace mitzvah. Who has a din of a mace mitzvah which is koine mekoimai? Kol she'enoi koivrin. If somebody died without relatives, koire, he calls out v'acherim oininoisai, and others respond to him, meaning theoretically if the mace would call out for attention, to be somebody to heed his call. So he has his relatives who come attend to him. Is a mace mitzvah. That's not called a mace mitzvah. You cannot bury him where you find him. But only a mace mitzvah who is in a desperate situation, an unattended mace without anybody to take care of him, there the Chachamim say that you bury him where he is. He's koine mekayim. What is the reason for that? So Chazon Ish explains that the concern is that perhaps if we burden him to take him to a proper burial area, he might neglect it. He might go ahead and just leave it as is and not even bother burying him. Chacham allowed a special allowance to put a mace mitzvah where you find him, bury him right then and there, even if it's sitting in somebody's property. So this is regarding a mace mitzvah. However, when it comes to these soldiers, which are not categorized as mace mitzvah, they have relatives, so they're not considered to be an unattended mace. So they don't conform to the halacha mace mitzvah. Rather, there's a special takana that they can be buried right then and there in the battlefield due to the exceptional need and necessity. Says the Gemara, mace mitzvah is that so that a mace mitzvah acquires his place, meaning you bury him right where you find him. Atani, we looked in the price. I might say mace muto b'strati. If one chances upon a mace who's lying in a street, a public street, he goes ahead and he clears him. Mifaneo limin asratio or lismal asratio. He vacates him either to the right side of the street or buries him on the left side of the stratio. Now, once he's doing that, he has to take a look what's going on the sides. Let's say we have fields on either side. Which one is more suitable, appropriate for burial? So the Brisa will tell us he's meant to go ahead and cause the least amount of damage. Sadeh bur v'sadeh ner. On one side we have a sadeh bur, a fallow field. On the other side we have a sadeh ner, a cultivated field, a plowed field. So which one? Where should he bury him? Mefaneu l'sadeh bur. He should choose the fallow field, bury him there. Sadeh ner v'sadeh zera. Let's say he has a choice between a cultivated field and a planted field. Mefaneu, we should vacate him l'sadeh ner, to merely the cultivated field to minimize damage. What if they're both the same situation? They're both cultivated, shteim zruis, both planted, shteim buris, both fallow. Then it's up to him. He brings them to whichever side he chooses. So this is a kasha. We just learned that a mace mitzvah is koine mekoimai. He's meant to be buried exactly where you find him. Not meant to transport him elsewhere. So why does the Brisa say that he takes him over to the side, this field, that field? How does that work? Amar Bibi, we're speaking about a unique situation where the mace is lying square right across that road. Babe ala metzar, meaning between both boundaries of that road, right across the road, it presents a halachic hazard here, a tumah hazard. So you have to go ahead and remove it, lest people come and become tamei, kayhanim, etc. So you have to remove him from the thoroughfare. Now, once you're going to remove him, in any case, may as well make the right decision and put him in the more appropriate location. Since permission was given to vacate him, to remove him from this area, that's why he goes ahead and he puts him wherever he chooses, meaning the more appropriate location. But ordinarily a mace mitzvah, meaning somebody who's an unattended mace and is lying in a place where he doesn't present any special hazard, you meant to leave him right there in his location. Continues the Gemara back to the troops at war. They are potter from rechitzas yadayim. Says the Gemara, ptur rechitzas yadayim or abaya. This is only said. We're speaking about washing your hands prior to your meal. So they're potter from going ahead and burning themselves to search for water. Unlike your standard person who's obligated to go ahead and look for water. The Gemara tells us up to a mil in certain situations, they don't have that obligation to go search for water. But they are obligated to wash their hands after the meal. Why? Why did the Chacham say that, generally speaking, washing one's hands after mealtime is an obligation? And that also explains why the soldiers are obligated. Because this is not just a halachic thing. This is actually not a halachic thing. It's just a health precaution. There's a specific type of salt, sdoim salt, it can cause blindness. And as Rashi says, one is meant to eat salt together with his meal. In fact, they would actually eat salt directly, dipping their fingers, and eat it in that manner. So Chacham were concerned about the sakana involved. So in order to avoid danger, one is meant to wash himself, mayim achronim, after his meal. And therefore, we don't exempt these soldiers. It's not a halachic matter that we come to exempt them from. It's a matter of health and danger. Therefore, they are obligated to do so. This melach staimis can be found in a very small amount. Kekurta bekura, like 1 grain in a huge amount of salt, a kur salt. Kur of salt, which is a very large amount, 30 sa. Only a teeny bit of it is going to be melach staimis. And apparently, even so, Chacham were concerned that a person should not put himself in danger due to coming into contact with the melach staimis. So this works for eating. What if a person is not actually eating? Kayil milchamai. Person measured salt. Is he chayiv b'mayim achronim? Amar Leisi told him, certainly, there's no need to say. Of course. He get himself all involved in the salt. Of course, there's a sakana that he might encounter this melach staimis element here, which can put him in danger. Tesis points out that now we don't actually do the Imayim Achronim for 2 reasons. Number 1, it's not common to have this melach staimis amongst us, and number 2, we are not accustomed to directly eat salt with our fingers. Therefore, Tesis says the minhag is not to do Imayim Achronim. Actually, in halacha, both shitas are brought down whether or not nowadays we do Imayim Achronim. Continues the Gemara, umidmai, so they are potter from dmai, meaning they're allowed to eat the produce brought from an unlearned fellow in Aretz, which entails a suffix of whether or not the tumas and ma'aser were properly addressed. Says the Gemara, the Snan, as we learned in the Mishnah, machilan zanim dmai. When we feed poor people dmai, ves achsanya dmai, also we can feed the achsanya, which Rashi describes as these soldiers, Jewish soldiers, which are supported by the members of the community. So due to the necessity here, the Chachamim allowed feeding these people dmai. This way you can give them a large amount of food. You don't first need to remove the truma and the meiser. You can give them the entire quantity. Feed the yaniyim, feed the achsani. Continues the Gemara. Actually, Rav Huna says it's a machlekes. Rav Huna Tana, we learned beis shama ein machilan es aniyim dmai ves achsani dmai v'sil lo ein machilin es aniyim dmai ves achsani dmai. So indeed, our Mishnah follows beis shita that when we feed these soldiers at war, the achsanya, they can feed them dmai. It is permitted for them. The Chacham made a special exemption in this situation. Rashi explains, since really, roiv of the Amma Oretz take off Meiser. Someone at Torah it's mutter, it's merely a chumrah b'drabanan, and they suspended the chumrah when it comes to these situations of necessity. Continues the Gemara, what else were these soldiers at war exempt from? Umila Arif, they don't need to make an Erev. Amrid v'Rabbi Lo Yishanu, this is only said regarding El Erev Chatzeris. They don't need to establish an Erev Chatzeris to go ahead and merge their usage between the members of this camp, to allow carrying throughout the camp between one tent and the other. That's not needed. But certainly when it comes to Ruvi Tchumen, so Ruvi Tchumen means a person only has a shear of 2,000 amma which he can walk. So one can't walk past a boundary of 2,000 amma out of the city, unless he sets down the Erev Tchumen, places a piece of bread there, etc., which makes that his Shabbos residence. That becomes his Makom Shvisa, which allows him to walk 2,000 ammas past that point. So this is not something which we exempt these soldiers from. Why? Because the Ruvi Chatzeris is Rabbanon. So they suspended their requirement. But a Ruvi Tchumen is Minat Torah. The Tani Rabchia, Loikin, al Ruvi Tchumen V'Torah. If one is over in Ruvi Tchumen, he gets Malchus. This is a Din Torah, a Lav Minat Torah. Where is the law? The pasuk says, "Al Yitzei Shmim Koyim B'Yom Shabbos." One may not go out of his makom, of his boundary on Shabbos. So even the soldiers are obligated to set down the Erev Tchum. Maskef Rabbi Yonasan. He's simply questioning. Rav Chia said that there's malchus involved. How can you say that? The pasuk doesn't say Lo Yitzei Shmim Koyim. Rather, it says Al Yitzei Shmim Koyim. V'chei loikin alav shebe'al. Is there malchus applied when one transgresses a lav, which only employs the term al? So he holds that al is not really a lav. It's not really so sharp like loy. Al is more like a request, a very strong suggestion we find in the Torah, al no. So we see that al is not so strict and direct like loy. So how can you say that there's malchus involved? Masker of Achav Yaakov. So he responded as follows. You say that al does not entail malchus. If that's the case, al tivnu elo oives yolidoinim. Don't turn to these types of sorcerers, oives yidoinim. And the pasuk only employs the word al hachinami deloilaki. Are you going to say in this case as well there's no malchus? Certainly there is. So therefore, what's the kasha here regarding Erev Tchumen? The pasuk says al yitzishim kaimai. You can't do that. It's a lav, and it results in malchus. Explains the Gemara. Rabbi Yonasan hache kashale. Rabbi Yonasan's kasha was as follows. What was difficult to him was that this lav, al yitishim kaimim b'mashavas, actually has two applications. The basic application, don't leave your boundary, al yitishim kaimim. But we also learn from this the isser of the melacha of hayitzah, of carrying an object from Rosh Hashanah to Rosh Hashanah. And we learn that from the pasuk al yitishim kaimim to mean al yitzi ishmim kaimim. A person should not take something out. He shouldn't carry an object. He shouldn't go out with an object from his makom on Shabbos. So now, since this pasuk is applied to a melacha, and what happens if a person is over a melacha? He gets misas bezdin. So there's a misa involved. Now the Torah doesn't punish, doesn't give misa unless it first forewarns the person, it gives an hazhara. So apparently this pasuk, which is applied to the melacha of Eitzah, is actually the azhara of that malacha. Don't do this, because it can result in Mrs. Bezdin. Now the same azhara, which is going to be applied to Mrs. Bezdin, cannot feasibly be applied to another einish. You can't say that this will also result in malchus. The same pasuk can't be warning two things. Let's see inside. This was his kasha. Lav shenitin lazharas Mrs. Bezdin. This lav al yotzesh mikoymai is a lav which is applied to warn for the malacha that should not be done, which can result in a Mrs. Bezdin. V'chol lav shenitin lazharas Mrs. Bezdin. Any lav which is applied for that purpose, a laikim lav. There's no malchus as a result of being over this lav. So how can you say that if one is over on the issue of tchumen, which is derived from this very pasuk, which is already being applied for the malacha of Eitzah to warn somebody, don't come to Mrs. Bezdin, how can you say that same law will also be applied for malchus? Amar Rav Ashi, No, this pasuk is actually not a pasuk warning against doing malacha v'tzah. Miksiv al yoitzi. Does the pasuk then say al yoitzi? A person should not carry out. Al yoitzi ksiv. The pasuk is merely saying a person should not go out himself. He shouldn't walk out of the tchum. It's strictly applying to leaving the person's tchum. Therefore, certainly, if a person is over on that isser, he will get malchus. So in summary, we learned about the machne, the soldiers which are engaged in the melchemes harishus, a non-mitzvah war. We have many exceptions, many exemptions. They can bring eitzim and kol makom to gather firewood. The Gemara tells us it can be even real wood, detached from the ground, dry. They can be choynim b'chol makom. They could establish their camp anywhere. They are nikbar in the place where they are killed, even though they're not a meis mitzvah. They are patuf until sedayim, referring to mayim rishonim prior to the meal. They don't need to go and search for water like a standard person. They're allowed to eat may, and they are patuf from an area of chatziris. Hadron aloch mavi. Says the Mishnah, oisin pasin liberois. One can establish, can plant pasin, boards, posts, liberois around these wells which are in Shusarab. Let's take a look at Rashi inside, which is about in the middle of the Amud, beginning with the words oisin, right at the beginning of the Mishnah. Oisin pasin liberois. Explain Rashi. These wells are in Shusarab. Shusarab. Ubirois asman Shusayachadin. These wells are actually Shusayachad. Why? Shamokim Asura. They're 10 tefachim deep. So this prevents a person from using them on Shabbos. One cannot draw water from this well and bring the water outside the well, which is just a rabbin. So Chacham were concerned, the Gemara will tell us later, regarding the Oile Regalim. The Yidden that are going to be Oile Regal to Yerushalayim, they're going to bring along their livestock. The Chacham were concerned that they should have enough water supply to feed their animals. Therefore, Chachamim applied a special leniency here. Explains Rashi. V'oisim pasen elu. We go ahead and we erect these posts, lahachem lahem hekef, to prepare an enclosure around this bear. Sheyu apasim alo. These boards, they should go ahead and make oisin esvivus habar shayachet. They affect Rish Sayachet here. The area enclosed within these posts, which are surrounding the bar, is Rish Sayachet. V'yamale v'yoytzi v'yaniach sham. Now you can go ahead and fill up his pail, take out the water, place it inside this enclosure. V'tikonis behem v'yashkena. As behem will come in and he will feed the behem. So this was a heter for the sake of the Regalim. It should have enough water to feed their livestock. So one can go ahead and encircle the be'er with very incomplete, very partial mechitzas, as the Gemara will describe for us, the Mishnah will describe for us. So although it's a very, very flimsy mechitza here, nevertheless, it's considered shayachid, and one can now draw water from this bar, which is shayachid, and place it outside the well, inside this enclosure, and feed his animal. Says the Mishnah again, oisen paslan berois. How are they constructed? Arba de yumden, 4 double posts. So the yumden is a joint word. Diyu means 2, midin means amudim. So there are double posts, twin posts. He's going to erect 4 of them on all 4 corners surrounding this be'er. So you have 4 L-shaped posts surrounding this be'er, which create that impression of an enclosed area. Taisus points out that Minat Torah is considered a Rish Hayachid because it is Shem Dal Mechites. It has the initiation, it has the shape, the configuration of 4 mechitzas. So although it's mostly exposed, it's paratz merubal oimid, but since it gives that impression of 4 mechitzas because these double posts, these twin posts, are erected on all 4 corners, so Minat Torah is considered shayachid. And although generally we don't rely on this type of mechitza, which is mostly unbuilt and exposed, when it comes to the case of the birois, which were necessary for the Eilu Regalim, the Chachamim allowed it to be used. So Arba de Yumdin, these are the 4 corner posts, Nir and Kishmoina, they appear like 8, because each one is a double post. Div Rabbi Yehuda. Now, what is the distance allowed between the posts? So according to Rabbi Yehuda, we allow the space to be up to 13 amis and a third. So that's the Shita of Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Meir Omer, he requires the space to be only 10 amas or less, like the ordinary halacha of a mechitza. Up until 10 is a pesach, beyond 10 is a pirza. Therefore, Rabbi Meir says, sometimes you have to add some posts. You have the 4 corners, but sometimes they're too far apart. It's beyond 10 amis between one post to the other. That's a pirza. So you must add some flat posts in between to lessen that gap. Therefore, says Rameir, Shmoina nirakish nemasa. Sometimes you have to have actually 8, meaning the 4 corners plus another 4 flat posts, which are going to intersect between those 2 double posts to lessen the gap to make it 10 amas or less. So it's Shmoina, a total of 8, nirakish nemasa, which appear like 12, because the 4 corners look like 8. And then you have the 4 flat posts, Arba Yumden, 4 double ones on the corners, Arba Pshutin, 4 flat ones along the middles. Continues the Mishnah. Goivan Asar Tvachim, the height of these posts are 10 Tvachim to comprise a Mechitza. V'roich van Shisha, there are 6 Tvachim. Why? Tos explains, when it has an Amma width, it creates that Pesach, and therefore it is usable. V'oyim Kolshu, how thin? Any size, be very thin. Now, what gap is allowed between these posts? So we have that machlekes, Rameir says a maximum of 10 amis. Reuven says 13 and a third. Ubeinein, between these posts, we are allowed a space. Kimeloi shtei revakos, the size, the space, which allows 2 revakos. Now revaka is a group of cows which are tied together, used for plowing, let's say. So the point here is to allow the feeding of the animals. So the Pesach is meant to allow through 2 groups, shtei revakos, 2 groups of these animals that are tied together, shall shalish bakar. Each group contains 3 cows. So they would plow with these cows, and he would bring them to feed them. Now, just in case there's another group coming out, so he needs to leave a space for 2-way traffic. So 1 group going in, 1 group going out. So 2 groups of 3 cows each, total an area of 10 amos, which is a Pesach. Divrei Rabbi Doimer shall arba. Each one of these groups consists of 4 cows. So perhaps there's some tough terrain. You need to plow it using 4 cows tied together. So on the basis of that, Rabbi determines that the entranceway here, the gap between the 2 boards, can be a distance of 13 and a third to accommodate 2 groups of 4 cows each. We need 2-way traffic, 1 group going in, 1 group going out. Continues the Mishnah, Kshurais. These groups are actually tied, meaning the 4 cows are tied together, which takes up less space than if they would be untied. Kshurais v'lo mitarais, tied and not untied. Achas nechnases v'achas yotzes. We visualize as though one is going in and one group is coming out. So sometimes that's what happens. You encounter traffic coming the other direction. So that's the basis of our establishing the shear in between these 2 boards. Now, how close to the be'er could you construct these posts? It says the Mishnah, mutalak of the be'er, you can make it as close as you want. Ubavad, provided, shetei para, you have enough room to accommodate the cow, roisha beruba b'fnim v'shois. So that there's enough room that he has his head and most of his body inside to drink. Let's take a look at Rashi, 4 lines from the bottom. There needs to be enough space, misfas ha-be'er ad bein ha-pasim, from the ridge of the be'er until the posts, kedei roisha v'ruba shel para, to accommodate the head and most of the para. But if it's less than that, you can't do it. Why? There's a concern. Dilma mamshechacha parasai. He might be drawn after his animal. He's going to take his pail of water and go find his animal and bring it outside the mechitza, which is Rishusarab. Therefore, we require there to be enough space there to accommodate his animal so that he's not tempted to carry outside the contained area. Now, how far away from the be'er can he construct these posts? Continues the Mishnah. The last word on the Amud, mutar, laharche koshu. You can place them at a very large, great distance from the be'er. You can enclose a very, very large area, provided he adds posts. Let's take a look at Rashi, the top line on the Amud, laharche koshu. As much as he desires, he can go ahead and enlarge this containment. Provided he increases the total number of boards. Meaning, he has to make sure that the space in between the boards doesn't surpass the shear of Pesach. Therefore, he keeps on adding boards to lessen the gaps. Explains Rashi, the kol kama de marchav mebar, the more he places them at a distance of the bar, magdil He increases the space between the posts. So he needs to keep on increasing boards so that there's no space, there isn't between the pashut, meaning the straight flat board, to the other flat board, between the board until the twin board at the corner, meaning the gaps in between the boards do not involve a gap of Yosim Yud Amis or Meir, more than 10 Amis according to Meir, which would be considered a perza, or it shouldn't surpass 13 and 30 according to Yehuda, which according to him, that's the shear of a Pesach. So you can go ahead and place them at a distance of the bear, but provided that you're mindful to keep the gaps between these boards within the parameter of a shear Pesach. That's a shear Tanakam. Continues the Mishnah. Rabbi Daimer, no, you have a maximum. Ad Beis Hasaim, there's a 2-saw limit. Because according to him, this is considered to be like a non-residential enclosure, in which case we spoke earlier, there's a maximum of Beis Hasaim which is allowed to be enclosed and to carry within it. Amr Lois, the Chacham responded, that doesn't apply in this case. Well, the Amr Beis Hasaim, Ela Legina, that only applies to a garden, or karfif, a storage area, a deer. But if he was enclosing a deer as a temporary corral used to fertilize the fields, a sar, a permanent pen, a muktzah, or a backyard, a chutzah, a front yard, which are residential areas, despite its size, it's fine. Aval afilu beis chameshes kurin, even if it's 5 kur in size. So a place where you can plant 5 kur, which is actually 75 times 2 saw. Afilu beis asara kurin, even if it encompasses a very great area of 10 kur, mutter, it's okay. Indeed, they conclude you can go ahead and place them at a very, very significant distance from the bear, provided he adds boards according to the need, as you mentioned earlier. Take a look on Rashi, 11 lines from the top, beginning with the words v'chatzer. So chatzer shalfnei batim, all these can be constructed even if they're very large in size. The cholahani, all these mentioned that kefim l'diru, they're considered to be residentially contained areas. V'hani pasi brois nami, these posts around the bear as well. Since the water there is suitable for human consumption, tashmish diram ma'al yasu, it's considered to be a proper residential area. It's intended for personal use, and therefore this contained area can be as large as one's heart desires. So in summary, we learned about the din of oisim pasim leberois. So in between these posts, you can leave a space which has a share Pesach, which according to Rabbi is 10 amis. According to Rabbi Yehuda, even further, 13 am and a third. You can place them very close to the be'er, provided there's enough space for the animal. You can place them at a distance from the be'er. According to Rabbi Yehuda, if you have maximum space of Beis Hasayim, according to Rabbanon, even if it's much further away. Okay, time for a brief review of today's daf. We began with a discussion of mechitzos geruos, inferior partitions. It either has only shesi going up or erev going across, in which case it doesn't have that residential element to it. They're temporary, fleeting in nature. So if an individual on his own is using these mechitzas, he only has a limit of 2 sa'ah. But if it's a group, 3 people traveling as a caravan, then we allow them kedei tzorchan, as much as they need. Now what if they began with a group of 3 at the onset of Shabbos, and then one of them disappeared, or in the reverse, they began with 2, and another fellow came along. According to Rav Huna, it's the onset, the commencement of Shabbos that determines halacha throughout the entire Shabbos. According to Rav Yitzchak, we look at the present moment, at the state of the diyurin. How many people are present? If it's 3, then it's okay. If it's 2, then they cannot carry in this very large area. The Gemara told us about another machlokes regarding a chartza shnifratz, or a bias that was breached and lost its mechitza. According to Rabbi Yehuda, they can continue using this area throughout this entire Shabbos. According to Rabbi Yosi, since the mechitzas are gone, it's awesome. We learned about a machne, Jewish soldiers involved in war, Melchemes Reshus. There are many exceptions for them. Many heterim, they can bring firewood from whenever they find. They can be choyne b'chamakim, establish their camp wherever they need. The kvura is exactly where they were felled, even if they're not considered a meis mitzvah. They are pata from going to search for water, to wash their hands prior to a meal. They are mutati itmai, they are pata from ev chatzeris. We concluded the halacha of oisim pasim berois, which was intended specifically for the oile regalim, to supply them with water for their animals. So one can go ahead and construct these boards surrounding the be'er to make a Rosh Hashanah in between these boards to allow drawing from that well, which is a Rosh Hashanah, to the area beside it, which is also considered to be a Rosh Hashanah.